All statements and opinions expressed by guests of the Adult in the Room podcast are strictly their own and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or opinions of the host, producers, or advertisers. All interviews are presented in their most complete possible form in the interests of free speech. No statements should be interpreted as financial, legal, or medical advice. Listener and viewer discretion are strongly advised.
It's the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. That's me. Well, good afternoon. Victoria Taft with you, the Adult in the Room. And welcome to those who are watching on Facebook for the first time. We finally got around to doing a live stream on Facebook. I mean, there's a lot of followers there. So I thought, well, what the heck? I always give you my, shorts and the videos that we do here, and you might as well see it live and then go look at the other platforms when you're done. The other thing is that we, of course, are going on X and Spotify. We're not doing live, but that's our home base. And let's see, what else do you need to know? Rumble, live. YouTube, live. Welcome to all of you, and you are welcome to comment. A lot of commenters from YouTube. So that's where you probably get an opportunity to do that real time during the program. Today, we are going to talk about the National Guard shootings in Washington, D.C. last week, right before the Thanksgiving holiday. And we're going to talk to somebody who actually has a connection to the West Virginia National Guard contingent in Washington, D.C. that day, knows a lot about it. He's written a book, as a matter of fact, and I'm looking forward to speaking with him about that and how this whole National Guard thing works. Also, one of my favorite guests of all time, and I think he's been on, this might be his third time on, and if it's just his second time, it's because I've been pining away to have Sam Faddis on the program again. He's a former CIA spook, Middle East expert. He was the first guy with a band of guys in for, before the Iraq War. You know what he was doing? He was looking for weapons of mass destruction. And you're not going to believe this, but if you stick around long enough, I'll find out from him if he ever found any. And, just one of the big mysteries of intelligence work and lying our way into wars, if that's the preferred way you'd like to hear it. Okay, a couple of things before we get to our terrific guest who's coming up in just a couple of minutes. And it is something that, as a matter of fact, I was watching Tim Pool last night on Timcast, and because Shelley Boufarage was one of his guests, and she, of course, is Honey Badger Mom. We know her from the West Coast to Mest Coast, and I just wanted to see what she was going to do. She did a great job, and it was fantastic. But hello. Nice microphone. It is a nice microphone. Anyway, so I do that at least once every 10 shows. So just get used to it if you haven't been watching. But anyway, so I saw this because I saw it for what it was when I saw it on Tim's show. And of course, he did too. But I've gone a little deeper into it. And I want to bring you into it before we get to our guest as well. And it is these billboards that are up and around in the United States of America, outside of the military installations, bases, and Camp Lejeune to Fort Benning, all sorts of things. And the questions are, hey, this isn't what you signed up for. That's what Trump's doing to you, basically. What do you think he's trying to do, getting you to do something for which you are not qualified and you are not allowed to do under U.S. law? That's what they want you to think. Here's another one. I'll remove that one and put this bad boy over there. Did you go airborne just to pull security for ICE? Not what you signed up for.org. I'll get to that in just a second. So this is an attempt to dispirit our troops, to make them think twice about taking orders from anybody that Donald Trump would ever send them. I've never seen anything quite like this, except perhaps spycraft and tradecraft that you can only read about in things out of World War II. And I'm sure that Sam and the colonel, who will be on in just a couple of minutes, will be able to tell me more instances of this happening. But it's all part and parcel of the same kind of political deal. It's a plan. It's an operation. It's an information operation, which was followed up just a few days ago by the people that some are calling the seditious six. These are the six senators and congressmen and former CIA spooks who have said that, you don't have to follow illegal orders. And then they never tell you what these so-called illegal orders are. Indeed, this has happened in the state of Oregon just recently, wherein the governor there said, hey, you don't have to do anything that is untoward. And you know what we're going to do? We are going to pound the table until such time that we find out if ICE is doing anything wrong. And if they do, when they do. In fact, they probably already have, without telling you anything that they've done that is illegal. It's just an operation, and it's done by the left. You have to ask yourself, why in tarnation is it done by the left? And maybe somebody on the left who is watching right now could let me know in the comment section. Here's another one. Billboards aimed at troops ask, is this what you signed up for? And this one is a National Guard one. It's outside, I think it's in Washington, D.C., and this one was in Task and Purpose. And so that is what they are doing. And I thought to myself, I have questions. And the questions are, okay, who's paying for this? So here's what I did. Obviously, I went to the website. And this is a little video I did of some of the things on the website. You have questions and you're not alone. But first, here are things you need to do. Go dark. Get secret. So you can spy and give us information. Yeah, I said it. That's exactly what they're doing. Be sure to access resources from a personal device, not a military government computer, an email account, a mill count, or phone or Wi-Fi network. No, you can't do that. Don't do that. Don't be stupid. Get a Proton Mail account. I have one. I have a Proton Mail account. And why wouldn't I? And get on Signal for encrypted texts and calls so we can get in touch with you. Okay. All right. Why would they be doing that? What's the purpose of that? And you got more. Virtual private network. Get on a VPN, everybody. Got to do that. I sort of paused there. Let me just squeeze up a little bit with my NordVPN. Oh, okay. Support resources for service members. And this is a group called About Faces, all under the same umbrella. All under the same umbrella. I tend to say things. Hey, Jordan Grant, how are you, buddy? He's listening in the Pacific Northwest. GI Rights Hotline. And the National Lawyers Guild. The National Lawyers Guild is always everywhere all at once. And I looked up because I have spoken with on this program the experts on these chasing the money, finding out, following the money, Seamus Bruner. And also I've talked with Ryan Morrow, and he has also given us insights into the National Lawyers Guild, because the National Lawyers Guild are the green hat wearing dudes in vests and dudettes who are outside the ICE protests and taking down any possible exculpatory evidence on behalf of their clients, which are the violent protesters. And they also, thanks to the generous Soros Foundation and others, they have lots of money to bail out people from jail. And they have money to give the people who are buying supplies. You know, they always have that mutual aid station in Portland. When I went there before they took it down, they had a mutual aid station. And the mutual aid station was several feet long, 50 to 60 feet long. And it was full of nice food, probably from elephants in Portland. I mean, it was really nice. Maybe it was from Safeway. I don't know. But they didn't make it. They bought it. And they had free food for the protesters. Come on out. We'll pay you free food. We'll also pay you, if you get arrested and, et cetera. And so here we go. We've got Seamus Bruner talking about these kinds of entities that come to the aid of people like this organization putting billboards out there. in this organization giving aid and comfort to Antifa.
We followed it to the top of what we are calling the protest industrial complex, or Riot Inc. is the term we've come up with. And I said, like every corporation, Riot Inc. has many divisions. Yes, it has the boots on the ground foot soldier division, which is Antifa, but it also has a communications and PR division. It has a very well-funded legal division, and it also has investors like most corporations. And so we really focus on the investors of Riot Inc. That would be, of course, the Soros Open Society Network. There's other funding networks that a lot of people haven't heard about, like the Arabella Funding Network,
Arabella's huge.
Tides Funding Network.
Tides is huge.
And there's also foreign investors like Neville Roy Singham is a name that people are starting to become familiar with. There's also the Swiss billionaire Hans-Jörg Wyss. He's pouring in tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars actually into the American political process. And many of those dollars go into Riot Inc. And so it's important to think about Riot Inc. as, yes, it's got Antifa, but what about all of the other divisions that are helping foment this chaos, enabling the violence, funding it in many cases that we found? And so that was really the message to President Trump. And I think what he found most shocking is that these investors, these local ones like Soros, we also mapped out the Rockefeller Funding Network, they get taxpayer money. And so there is an indirect path from your pocket to the pockets of the protesters and rioters.
Wow. And these are the people who are trying to get you to supporting the efforts to help clean up the cities and to support the ICE officers and Border Patrol and all those things that are going on. And, you know, if everybody has an opinion about whether or not the National Guard should be there keeping things safe while other federal officers do other things, you can have an opinion about that. But what's nefarious is that there are organizations that are openly trying to undercut that, who are trying to dispirit Americans and devalue the worth that our men and women in uniform have. And one of the instances that we just saw, of course, naturally, the other day was the National Guard shootings. I mean, that's just saddest thing. And one of the persons that we were very fortunate to get on the program today was Colonel Josh McConkey. He's an emergency preparedness liaison officer for the West Virginia Joint Task Force, NCR, which is the National Capital Region. And he is on the Adult in the Room podcast today. And Colonel, thanks so much for coming on. Dr. Josh McConkey, thank you so much for coming on the Adult in the Room podcast.
Thank you very much.
I know you've been there for a few minutes. Does any of this that I've been talking about resonate with where you're at right now?
Boy, seeing a lot of things that I have not seen before, and it's certainly disturbing.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And of course, now it resulted in Sarah Beckstrom dying and Andrew Wolf fighting for his life, and a guy who we thought was a friend, and it turns out he wasn't, clearly, Ramanullah Lockenwall. I had to write it down because I will never be able to say that off the top of my head. What happened there? What do you know?
From what they've found out so far, this is under investigation. So certainly no official statements, but it appears that he, when he got to the United States over this last several years, has become radicalized, like right here in our own country.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of contact with individuals in Afghanistan. I know, Kash Patel and the FBI are working 24/7 on this and following all leads. So they will find the answers for us eventually here, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah, this guy, he came all the way from Washington State to Washington, D.C. to commit those murders or do something that was something he was just driven to do. And I guess since he was a Muslim and he was a person who was Taliban or very far ISIS related, that he had it in him to do that. And it's incredibly sad. You've written a book. In fact, this is something I want to ask you about because Be the Weight Behind the Spear. This is a book to people who are, what did you call them? The COVID generation?
Yes. This, that whole last half of Generation Z, the COVID generation that we shut out of schools, shut out of churches, and shut out of communities, they're struggling right now.
Yeah, they are. And you know what? There is a spiritual battle, if you will, for the futures of those kids, for the souls of those kids. And I don't mean that necessarily in a church-driven way. What I mean is in a secular way, for the kids of that era to be easily persuaded to hate their country. And
And
this is a help, I think, right?
yeah, absolutely. So this is a call to action for everyone in this country. Our best resource is our people. It's teachers, coaches, volunteers, and families. That's what sets us apart. That's what makes us different. And we need to own this problem together. It's easy to pass the blame to those that were involved during COVID, making some of those poor decisions. But
Mhm.
we still have to pick up those pieces. And as an emergency doctor, I see the anxiety, I see the depression, and then unfortunately a pretty alarming rise in suicides. And, between that and being a military commander and then working with that same generation as a commander, boy, they just lack resiliency skills and simple leadership and ability to
Yeah,
communicate. So
they
just
really do.
the
They
social
just
media world has been horrible for them.
they
Their
cannot
development.
cope. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just like they can't
Yeah.
cope.
Oh
Tell me
boy.
more. Tell me more and tell me
As a
how this is all
military,
playing into that.
yeah, when I saw when it was at the worst, really, as an emergency doctor, you just keep doing the same thing over and over. You feel like you're just beating your head against the wall, like
Huh,
somebody has to do something. And then when
right.
I became a commander, and that was still pervasive through the military. I mean, there were people and some individuals that had been there for a hot minute, and then they were
Mhm.
just going to quit because they weren't getting promoted right away, or they weren't getting some bonus money. It's like, hey, listen, why don't you just go to the basic course first before you pin on general? Let's just start off with basic, and then let's talk with you. Let's just talk about some officer advanced courses and captain career courses. Nobody really gets made a general, within the first 6 months of them coming into the military, and just the entitlement, and it was quite shocking. Now, that perception is their reality. So the really challenging part was, how do we reach this generation? How do we bring them back into the fold? And so that was the real challenge during my 3 years in command, and was very successful with that. But that's why I wrote the book. It's for people to engage their communities and help this generation before it's too late.
Okay, well, those communities are seeing stuff like this. For example, outside, I this is in the Capitol, I guess, the DC, and this is billboards aimed at troops is asking, is this what you signed up for? Well, isn't that the question you just talked about?
Well, I heard what you were speaking a little bit earlier, and you
Uh-huh.
look back at World War II with
Yes.
that informational warfare, like Tokyo Rose, right?
Right.
Out there on the radio, trying to sow doubt into GIs' minds. This is crazy. I can't believe we're seeing this in our own country. I can't believe we're seeing this outside of our military installations. And then you talk about those lawmakers making a video that was
Yeah.
incredibly inappropriate. You talk about all the political division we had in the 1960s. Can you imagine lawmakers making some type of video or movie and putting it out there during the Vietnam War? I mean, this
Uh,
is this is absolutely
uh-uh.
mind-boggling.
It is, and it's happening apparently all around where soldiers congregate. I wonder if it's over by Camp Pendleton. I'm thinking about, or JBLM, or places along the West Coast, West Coast. Did you go airborne just to pull security for ICE? I mean, they really are trying to sell the idea that what is going on right now to secure our country is wrong. And yeah,
What
go ahead.
they're completely disregarding is that the men and the women that are there in DC right now and some of the other cities, they volunteered for that. This is exactly what they signed up for. They want to make their communities a safer place. If someone came into Raleigh, North Carolina and started rioting and burning cars and just destroying things, I served 9 years in the Army
Mm,
National Guard. I was at the Nebraska Guard. But that's that defense support of civil authorities, and just these are your friends. These are your neighbors. These aren't foreign invaders. They
no,
volunteered for these assignments. And when you see, the two individuals, especially Sarah, that just lost her life,
yeah.
they volunteered for that.
Mm,
They gave up their Thanksgiving. They volunteered for two other individuals to go home that had children and families. They were there less than 24 hours. And then you had this very motivated individual drive all the way across the country from Bellingham, Washington,
mhm.
days driving, with the sole intent of killing American soldiers. And that's shocking.
Well, I think that's what he was doing. He certainly wanted to commit an act of jihad because, as my friend Robert Spencer pointed out in his piece recently, Why was the DC National Guard shooter naked except for a pair of socks? And some, at first I saw that and I went, oh, okay. He's an expert on jihad and that sort of thing. And I thought, well, it's because that we are told now, because there are so many hidden operators that came over the border over the past 4 years, in addition to now these people from Afghanistan, and they some are just jihadists. It's they believe that part of the Quran where it says, well, you know what? I don't know. I can't remember. You probably know more than I do. I can't remember if it's the Medina portion or the Mecca portion where it embraces the idea of jihad, or if it's just the Hadith, and I can't remember. Be that as it may, this guy certainly took it to heart and came across and did that. And so Robert Spencer's viewpoint is we know why he took his clothes off after shooting him, because he was ready to get shot so he could go and be ready to go for his 72 virgins. It's exactly what happened. Is that wild? I mean, it's just,
It's incredibly disturbing is what it is.
yeah.
And, we all know that we wear that uniform in public, as sad as it is. I had to counsel my men and women, like, listen, don't wear your uniform outside the gates. When we leave, when we drive home, when you go out to dinner, put on civilian clothes. When you put on the uniform, it does make you a target. It's something we've really briefed on for really the last 10 years or more.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of sad, like right here in our own country, right in our nation's capital, that, two individuals were gunned down there.
That's
It's,
sort of the point, wasn't it?
it's shocking.
That's probably the point, huh?
It's, just so many thoughts run through your mind. I mean, like, everyone that's out there, we have 2,100 National Guard men and women that are out serving right now in the Washington, D.C. area. And, they're all thinking that that could be me.
Yeah, they are. Jordan writes, and I commend you, Josh, for your book and for your service to our nation. Leaders like yourself are so encouraging to all of us patriots. And I certainly second that as well. Thank you so much, Jordan, for writing in on that. Yeah. Okay. So what are you hearing from the West Virginia National Guard? That's where you liaise, or with whom you will liaise. What are you thinking?
So, I talked with the communications director for Governor Morrissey on Wednesday evening. Just talking. There were initial reports. There were some conflicting reports that the two guard members had been killed early on, and the
Right.
governor unfortunately had some incorrect information, and they
Yeah.
corrected that immediately. So I had just reached out to the communications director. I haven't talked with him since Wednesday evening, but I know West Virginians are hurting.
Yeah, they are. So, of course they are. We all are. I noticed that in fact, I have lots of pictures that I wanted to share with you on some of these National Guardsmen and women who are out there. It's crazy what they're doing out there. Let's see, making friends. Check this out. It's kind of fun. She said, hopefully is now I'm looking desperately for my photo, but hold on. Never fear. Never fear. Okay.
I
It's
know those
beautiful.
members they take a lot of pride in what they're doing.
Yeah.
This is the face of our nation, and the decrease in the violent crimes and all crime. I mean, that's something to be proud of. They're part of something bigger than themselves.
Yeah. I think, let's see. Here we go. Finally. Here's a guy who found a dog.
Mm.
I mean, I love that. Just because we got these guys, they're all over the place. They're on the metro. They're riding on the metro. They're walking the streets. They're down by the ball yard. They're doing all kinds of things. And they are making their presence known because that's what their job is, to sort of deter anybody who might want to do something bad to somebody else who's an innocent on the streets of DC. I don't see anything wrong with that. It has done nothing but help.
The
You?
majority of Americans are these are good visions for them. When they see these people walk in their communities, they feel safer. It's a lot harder to like carjack somebody or steal the rims in their car when there's a National Guard member like standing right next to you. Okay,
Yeah.
so I mean, you can't argue the results. It's crystal clear.
Sure. And of course, people say, oh, that's not their job. And here is the honor procession for Sarah Beckstrom the other day. So
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking. It really is. Okay. So they're out there. They volunteered for this, but they didn't volunteer to get shot at. I mean, they know, but some wackadoodle who's going to come on the streets and kill them,
I mean,
two people.
you don't expect something like that to happen on home soil. I've served in combat. I spent time in Iraq in 2007, and direct and indirect fire. You don't expect something like that just serving right in your nation's capital. It's but we certainly brief, and they knew there were some risks for that,
Hmm.
but I don't think anybody really thought they would see something like this.
I saw the senator say the other day, Lisa, what's her name, who was part of the seditious six, as they're calling them. And she talked about the fact that, oh, well, we're just afraid that those National Guardsmen are just going to go shoot people willy nilly. And it's a matter of fact, it looks like somebody came up and did that back to them before, right after she said that. He was probably on the road. Who knows? This man was obviously in pain and lost his mind. But, what do you think about somebody saying that?
You know, when you see members of Congress and senators trying to score political points and just stow that type of like just insane divisive like rhetoric, and then you see some of the signs and things that are posted outside. I hadn't seen any of those personally, but
Oh, yeah.
it it's hard to imagine what's going through their mind when they're doing that. I mean, my mind just goes back to World War II with like Tokyo Rose on the radio, but this is coming from our own members in the legislative branch.
Mhm.
It's incredibly inappropriate.
Now she's dead, and we've got another guy fighting for his life, and this little girl is dead, 20 years old.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting that he would shoot a woman. I guess I wonder what that was all about. If he did that on purpose, or if she just happened to be there in a uniform, or what have you.
Yeah, I know they'll have a lot more in the investigation, but I'm sure he just walked out and just shot the first two people he saw.
Yeah. And since you do have, you're a doctor and you liaise with the West Virginia National Guard, what else do we know that you can share with us?
Well, yeah, I just know that she had some life-threatening injuries immediately. A severe head injury really wasn't going to be survivable. And I know her
Mm.
father had made some public posts on that as well. And just my heart pours out for both the families and everybody in West Virginia. Just as far as anything other injuries, we're still that's under investigation and won't be releasing that.
Okay, well, man, um, it's sad. That's it. It's just sad. It's sad. I just kind of wonder what the author in you would tell people who thought they wanted to, volunteer for the National Guard. Now when they're not so
No.
sure.
Well, this you're part of something bigger than yourself. And we have been making these sacrifices, the men and women that have worn this uniform for well over 250 years. And there's a tremendous amount of pride in that. And so these two died heroes just the same.
Well, we
They
got one still
stepped up.
alive. Adam's still alive, so thank
Yeah, yeah,
goodness.
no,
But
still alive. But
or Andrew, excuse me.
yeah, Andrew. But Sarah, she died a hero. And
Yeah.
they took a bullet for this country, and we still take great pride in our service. And every person who's ever worn this uniform, all the families, I mean, I hopefully all 350 million people in America have a tremendous amount of respect for that. And our prayers and our thoughts go out to them and their family.
Thank you for your time. Be the weight behind the spear, and I guess you're talking about us. We need to be the weight behind the spear.
Yeah, that's
To
everyone in this country. They need to step up and take ownership of that. Get out there and coach, volunteer, go to some schools, some churches. Even if you don't like people, there's something you can do. Go to some animal shelters. Like those animals are emotional support animals for somebody. So we all have a different set of skills and gifts, and what we do matters every single day, and people need
Yeah.
to realize that.
Yeah, that's true. And thank you for your time, and thank you for your ability to give us some insights and good stuff. Appreciate it, doctor.
Thank you very
Appreciate it
much.
very
Appreciate it.
much. God bless you. Thank you. Well, just a little insight into what's going on in DC, and they're walking the streets and they're doing any manner of things that help people. And that's good. I mean, that's a good thing. But when it's something like this, I here we are, going to the ball yard, watching people at the ball yard, making sure things are going here. We're just being visible, just being visible. They're walking all over the city and they're all over the place. But what's really, I guess, I would say this is just so dispiriting. I know that that's the intention, right? To do these ridiculous billboards around. They started in September. Then we end up with a seditious 6. And now, trying to persuade people that this administration and this country are no longer worth fighting and dying for, and the principles are not worth fighting and dying for. And indeed, they're going to leave a big vacuum. And what comes in, people will just go, well, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And guess what happens? It creates a vacuum. And who fills that? Power seekers, people who want to. And honestly, the only time I've ever seen, when you talk about the people who did this, or for example, the National Lawyers Guild, come on. It's a communist organization. It is. I'm just looking at my little cheat sheet here. It is a communist organization. That's what's happening. It's a godless communist organization which has sought to undermine the foundational principles of the United States of America forever since their inception. That's why they had all these people. They had the trials and the Red Scare and all that stuff. We don't want to do that again. We just want to be able to politely but very firmly say, get the hell out of here. Out of my face is what I'm referring to. Okay. Well, one of the persons I really enjoy and have had on the Adult in the Room podcast before, it is Sam Faddis. He's a former he's retired CIA spook. He led the team into Iraq in advance of the 2003 invasion of Iraq. He's been there, done that, got the T-shirt. I didn't realize that he was the CIA's counterterrorism center. And he's also a former JAG. I did not know that either. So I imagine that a guy like Sam Faddis might have something to do and say to those who would, on the seditious 6 bunch, when they say, well, you know what? These guys, they should go talk to their JAG officer before they take an order. How are you, by the way? Thanks for coming back on.
I'm doing well. I try to hide that whole JAG thing. That the fact that I'm a lawyer is the real skeleton in my closet. The CIA thing's not a big deal.
I did. That's why I was surprised. I'm like, what's a lawyer doing in the CIA? Well, it's a good thing, though. Gives you some idea of. You were a prosecutor? Were you a federal prosecutor?
When I spent most of my time as a JAG officer, actually as a defense counsel, defending those who defended America.
That's great.
That was a busy time.
Yeah, it was.
That convinced me to hang up criminal law, being a defense attorney. So I walked.
Why? Because you lost your faith in humanity?
No, because I won a lot of cases for a lot of guys who should have gone to prison, and I was tired of carrying that baggage around. So
I've heard that before from people. After
Yes.
a long period of time, I've heard that from defense attorneys before. And other defense attorneys go, I don't defend these dirt balls. I defend the Constitution.
Yeah, well, you have to. Your ethical obligations are clear, but the point is, at the end of the day, you're like, okay, that dude should have gone to prison for a very long time, and he just walked in. I don't want to be carrying that baggage anymore. So, but
Yeah.
I'm leaving.
Yeah. Well, and then you went to the CIA and you wrote a book. I'll find your book and I'll put it up when I find it in my library of photos. And you've written several books actually. But so what I wanted to talk to you about was our shooter. But since I discovered that you had this skeleton in your closet, I wanted to find out what you would think of a representative or a senator who urged maybe former astronaut senator, who urged soldiers and airmen and Marines to, go see a JAG officer if you think something's hinky, because, that Trump, he's a dirtbag and we don't want him to be giving orders because, everything he does is illegal.
Yeah, well, look, what do they call them now? A seditious 6 or something like
The
that?
seditious 6, yes.
Yeah, look, it really irresponsible, and that's not strong enough. Reprehensible, right? And what they said technically is they just stated the law, which is
Right.
if you're given an illegal order and you don't carry it out. Okay. I mean, if you've captured a prisoner and he's under control and somebody tells you to put a gun to his head and pull the trigger and kill him, that's a clear illegal order, and no, you shouldn't follow it. But everybody already knows that, and the military follows those rules, and all these guys are always taught that. And obviously the real issue is the implication in what they said was that the president and his men and women are giving illegal orders, even though they cannot provide any evidence of such. So, you know, the unstated lie here is that there are such illegal orders being given.
Right, exactly.
But what really rubs me the wrong way as a guy who, you know, I came from a military family. I've been in the military. I've been around the military my whole life. Is you're potentially jamming up guys in uniform, right? Because in the military, if you do not comply with the lawful order, you can be court-martialed and sent to prison for that. It's not a democracy. The captain tells you to do something, you don't get to say, I need to go consult my counsel before I do that. If you don't comply, you can go to prison. So, you know, some guy watching this video decides, oh my God, we're being told to do illegal things and doesn't comply. Well, the seditious six are not coming to his rescue when they send him off to the stockade, when they screw him over for this. It's, you know, again, at best irresponsible, but really inexcusable. I mean, they know exactly what they were doing, and somebody, and you know, whether they should be prosecuted for that or not is another issue. They should be disgusted with themselves, ashamed of themselves. There's no defense for it.
Yeah. The guy who, I was gonna do a follow up on that, and I just don't know that the state of Oregon. I just wrote a story yesterday, and I was having fun with it. Okay, because you could do that at PJ Media. We all have opinions. And so I did it. I did the old dipsy doodle, and I said, well, obviously that Trump and Pete Hegseth are doing the right thing by wanting the National Guard in the state of Oregon and sending ICE in to do their thing, because clearly even though they say they're going to do something, they're shaking their fists at these guys. They have not offered any proof that any laws have been broken. They're just bringing up the specter of the law breaking and trying to shake their fist at them and say, we're going to punish you if you do. Well, guess what? Nobody gave any example of any law broken whatsoever. So I said, hey, they say they're doing everything right. So I had a little fun with that. And
well, that's the thing. They make these accusations. They have no evidence. I mean, they've been confronted about it and said, okay, so this is a big problem, right? So you must have lots of examples of all these illegal things that these guys have been told to do, and yet none of them have been able to come up with a single such example. It really, it's more of this attitude, I think, of just eating away at the republic, at respect for the law. It's sort of, we're just going to take this fight to the streets. We're going to make wild accusations. We're going to encourage people to break the law. At the end of the day, in all of this is the part where you lose the republic. You know what I mean? You've decided to do anything the ends justify the means. And when you're all done, you're like, okay, well, you've burned the system down now. Like, stop. Be grown-ups here.
Right.
You don't like the man's policies that's in the White House. Okay, fine. Then there's a mechanism. Stay within the confines of the law. Get people elected who have different ideas. Let's play by the rules. If we don't, in the end, we all lose, right? We got no country left.
Now, MJ wrote in and said what the seditious six did was seed doubt in the minds of the military. That's not a good thing. Then also wrote, and it's very strange that one of the activated Manchurian candidates from Afghanistan went and murdered 2 National Guard soldiers in D.C. And furthermore, he says, that person went and did the crime with a 357, I guess. I didn't hear that it was a 357, but fine. In broad daylight, yet they were trained for clandestine warfare. Okay, question. Who is this guy and what unit was he in the CIA? And
Right.
why did he do that?
So this guy was a member of one of several units that existed in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
They were run by the Central Intelligence Agency, if you will, in cooperation with the Afghan intelligence organization. But I mean, we created that.
I was gonna say.
Okay, so this is a thing that is funded by, directed by, run by USG, by the Central Intelligence Agency. And the way that works is there are paramilitary officers within CIA, ground branch guys, typically referred to. These are always guys that came out of military special ops of one variety or another. CIA doesn't send people to boot camp. They go hire the guy who's been doing this for 20 years from SEAL Team 6 or whatever. And these guys are embedded, so our guys, these ground branch guys, train the Afghans, and they run the missions and they direct this, and the Afghans in practice are working for them. What was this guy's job? What's the unit's job? To hunt down and kill and capture Taliban, and with a primary focus on leadership. So find intelligence, find out who's the Taliban commander in such and such an area, and then these teams go and find this guy and either bring him in to be questioned, capture him, not request to come in, or they kill him, whatever they were told to do, but that's what they did. This guy was part of that operation for years. And then when Afghanistan was turned over to the Taliban by Joe Biden, he and lots of other guys from these units were brought to the United States because obviously their life expectancy would not be particularly long if they stayed. As far as I can tell, having brought this guy to the United States with his family, and I've seen this goes for all the rest of it, we more or less just dumped him at various locations around the country.
It kind of sounds like that.
And then we largely washed our hands of them. I mean, they were relocated, and ultimately this guy was set up and put in an apartment with his family, but there was no real continuing contact. And CIA certainly appears to have completely washed their hands of these guys. So again, I don't want anybody to misinterpret this. I'm not making excuses for this guy. He's a murderer. He should be tried, convicted, and executed as far as I'm concerned. But from a standpoint of taking care of ourselves, it's not a real smart thing to bring hundreds of these guys to the States, dump them all over the country, and then basically break off contact and leave them to fend for themselves. In fact, I can tell you that CIA has brought people into this country like this for decades because we end up in a situation where a guy was helping us overseas, and all of a sudden he's got to get out of Dodge because the bad guys are looking for him. Yep. And one of the things that CIA has known for a very long time is that you cannot bring these people to the States and just dump them and forget about them, because a lot of times they don't do very well. They basically implode and they fall apart. And to begin with, you're concerned if it's a Russian and you brought him in, or he used to work for us in Moscow, and he gets all torqued off, he's going to go back to Moscow and go back to work for the other side and tell them everything that he knows from our side. So the policy used to be you keep in contact with these guys, you monitor them, and you intervene as necessary to keep them squared away. Apparently, we don't do that anymore. So we just left this guy to implode. And if you read the stuff about like the community social workers and neighbors who were left dealing with this guy, 2 years ago, it was clear they were talking about him being suicidal, sitting in a dark room for days with the blinds pulled, getting in a car, driving to Chicago, getting in a car, drive. This guy was falling apart at least 2 years ago. And nobody did anything. Nobody intervened. So now we have this horrible tragedy. And obviously my question is, where the heck are the rest of these guys? Like he
You
wasn't the
asked?
only. We brought hundreds of these guys here. We
Yeah.
just saw one of them fell apart and killed and shot 2 National Guardsmen. One of them's dead.
Yeah.
The other one may make it. But what about the other several hundred of these guys? Is anybody planning on changing the plan now, checking on them? Or are
I
we
see.
just going to wait till one of those, the next guy kills somebody?
Well, we have a list of Afghans who have done this, who have been here, and I read it. Daniel Greenfield wrote about it in,
Right.
and he, it was just chapter and verse. Oh, and then by the way, I'd forgotten about the election terror attack that was supposed to happen in 2024. He's in the prison now, that guy. And then politicians and media have claimed that Afghan guards and soldiers like Ramanullah and Nasir were heroes and allies who protected their soldiers. Here's the thing. And like I say, long list of these crimes done by these Afghan nationals who came to the United States and now lay in wait for some opportunity, if in fact that's their choice. But now check this out. So Joe Kent, who's in charge of the Counterterrorism Center, as I think you used to be too, didn't you?
I worked in CIA CTC, but I know
Oh, gotcha.
Joe. I know Joe very well.
Oh, yeah, excellent. Okay, he's a good guy, right?
Very good guy.
I wish he'd made it into Congress, but I'm happy with his role here.
Yes.
Here's what he said. The barbaric terrorist attack by the Afghan terrorists spurred righteous outrage over Biden administration's policy of importing people hostile to our nation. Yes, but on the other hand, the Trump administration gave him refugee status, apparently. But it was born of this disastrous Afghan withdrawal. But what Joe says is the vetting. It is true, she said, it's in the second paragraph thing. It's true that the terrorist who conducted the attack in D.C. was vetted by the intelligence community. However, he was only vetted to serve as a soldier to fight against the Taliban, AQ, and ISIS in Afghanistan. He was not vetted for his suitability to come to America and live among us as a neighbor, integrate into our communities, or eventually become an American citizen. Why didn't that happen?
Yeah, well, I don't think there was any vetting for any of them. I mean, first of all, I agree with everything that Joe said, not surprisingly, because he's a very squared away guy. But here's the thing, right? We're talking about this guy, Lockenwall. He's one of the guys from CIA units.
Yeah.
These units the CIA ran.
The 0 units or something, right? Is that what they call them?
They are referred to by a variety of names, some of which are classified, whatever. They're the CIA. The CIA units, we know what their purpose was. They were vetted in the sense of, we don't want these guys talking to the Taliban. If we're going to go kick in somebody's door tonight and try to grab a Taliban leader, we can't have a snitch here talking to the Taliban.
Right.
But Joe's 100% right. None of that has anything to do with what's going to happen if we take this guy and just dump him in the United States in an apartment working. I think he was working as a contract Amazon delivery guy.
Yeah. It's
But
a little different than kicking indoors.
Yeah, and of course he's now into him a completely alien culture, which he has no preparation for, no experience in. But these guys are actually the good case, because as sad as that is, because there's a whole bunch more Afghans that Biden just said, we don't even really know who the hell you are, but sure, get on a plane and come to America. So there are thousands and thousands and thousands more that never worked for us, that we have no records on. And by the way, I was having this conversation earlier today with somebody. You talk about vetting an Afghan. What the heck does that mean? Like, you're in a country, most of which is still in the 12th century, where there are no databases and there are no records. And really, legitimately, you're talking to a guy, he may not even know his real birth date, right? Because there's no record of it. And the village he's from appears on no map, right? It's not, people talk about vetting as if you're going to go to the magic computer and type something in and it's going to give you this all-seeing view. You're like, You know what the computer's going to tell you? Nobody has any records on this guy. Nobody ever heard of him before. So your guess is as good as mine as to whether he's a really good guy or a Taliban assassin or just he's crazy. There's no record because no records exist for most of them.
Yeah. Now, do you ever? I hesitate to say this on the air, but I mean, do you ever pay attention to Sarah Adams, who is looking at some of these bad actors, such as the people chasing down the people who did Abbygate and that sort of thing?
Mhm.
And I just kind of wonder, she believes, and I imagine that there are others who believe this as well, that there are a lot of people in our country who've come over on those planes or across the border or what have you, who are sitting around waiting to do an act of terrorism.
Yeah,
Do you
I
have
think
any?
I think everybody should be very worried about that. But here, somebody was asking me again earlier today, so how many such terrorists do you think are in the country? And I think there was some lady who says she used to be in the CIA, who claims that there are 1,000 Al-Qaeda operatives here or something.
Uh-huh.
And my response is, there might be 1,000, there might be hundreds. You want to know what the really terrifying aspect is? Nobody knows, and nobody is trying to find out. So you can speculate, you can throw out numbers, but the reality is we're not trying to get our arms around that, and we haven't been. So, for instance, right now, there's a whole bunch of FBI guys out in Washington State interviewing everybody, whoever came into contact with the guy who already shot 2 National Guardsmen in D.C. Okay. That's what law enforcement does. They investigate crimes that have already occurred. But what Intel's supposed to do is prevent the crime from occurring in the first place. They're supposed to be they're not the ones who investigate the fact that 9/11 occurred. They're supposed to stop 9/11 from ever happening. They're supposed to stop these things from happening. And that's the real failure here, is nobody's doing that. All these Afghans have flooded in. The border was wide open forever. Okay, most of the people who walked across the southern border are from Central America and they're looking for a better life. That's not me saying they should stay. That's just me saying that's
Sure.
the deal. But once the door is wide open, you don't have any idea who came in. Chinese operatives, Al-Qaeda operatives, ISIS operatives. So there is no ongoing effort to now find out who they are, where they went. So we're sitting around waiting for the next attack. And keep in mind that, not to be the depressing guy that I sometimes end up being, but it's with all sympathy for the 2 National Guards peoples who were shot.
Mm.
The next terrorist attack could be one heck of a lot worse than a guy shooting 2 people, right? I mean, we've experienced an attack where almost 3,000 people died on our soil at 9/11. So this does not have to just be something that is limited in scale. Again, with all respect for the families of the people that were shot here, not minimizing that at all. But when you don't have your arms around this problem, you don't have any idea how bad it's going to get.
This is the video of Abbygate, what happened at Abbygate.
Mhm.
And I mean, when you've got dillweeds making decisions like, oh, I know, let's get out of Bagram and then have to use the Kabul airport to get out. I mean, that's just insanity, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's completely insane. Bagram is a massive base and completely controlled, and gave us a security presence and the capacity to fly in as many troops and deploy as many military assets as we wanted and provide whatever support was required for that evacuation. And in fact, the military began that planning for that with the assumption that that would be the case. And as I understand it, 18th Airborne Corps down at Fort Bragg was way down in the weeds on making that plan when the Biden administration told them, we're not doing that. If you've ever been to Kabul, and the airstrip that they use to get out of there, the airport is down in a valley surrounded by high ground. The only miracle is that anybody made it out of there alive, to be honest with you. I hope,
I think that's Jake Sullivan. And Jake Sullivan was the guy in charge of all that. And Jake Sullivan was Hillary's right hand and Joe Biden's national security advisor. And Jake Sullivan is married to one of the seditious six. Yeah. He's Maggie, what's her name? Not his last name. And I honestly, this is the moment where these guys they're too close, obviously, to the bombing at Abbey Gate. And it's making a decision like that and then putting his wife up to perhaps making that ridiculous, was she a former CIA intelligence person? I mean, it's just too neat, isn't it, Sam? It's just too close.
Well, it's very incestuous and it's very ugly. And I got to tell you, there's a special place in hell for people that put our men and women in uniform in harm's way and then do not allow them to do what is required to come home safely, right? You don't do that. If you're not prepared to allow them to do what they need to do, then don't put them in that situation. You don't put them in that situation and then start tying their hands behind their back. And of course, what you know is that none of these people who make these decisions have ever been in those situations. They never themselves put any skin in the game. And by the way, their kids and their families don't have anything to do with that, right? I mean, sure. I live in small town Pennsylvania these days. The first row of parking spots in front of every Home Depot and big box store is reserved for Purple Heart recipients because there's that many guys and gals that are around here who came home broken from these wars. You don't see that in Bethesda or Silver Spring or any of those neighborhoods around Washington, D.C. You ever notice that?
No.
You don't see any Marine Corps flags flying on front porches. They're all big on putting people on getting involved in these things and then don't themselves ever plan on taking any risks.
Well, if they have that, I mean, I've noticed that there are some people in the state of Oregon who have told me that I fly a Trump flag, for example, American flag, Trump flag, and he's got nothing but death threats from Antifa nutballs.
I have no doubt that is true.
I don't doubt it either.
Yeah.
Well, what are we supposed to learn from this, Sam Faddis?
What we're supposed to learn from this is we need to demand that it change. And I think we're really at a critical juncture in that, not to shift gears on you, but, people sent Donald Trump to Washington and they really want a revolution.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about killing people, but I mean, they want a political revolution. They really want to throw the bastards out and overturn the apple cart. Let's break some China. Let's shake things up. I think people in general do not, unfortunately, feel like they have seen that revolution yet. So
10 months.
We need it desperately.
So what do we need to do in that revolution, Sam Faddis?
Well, look, let me grab a hold of just a piece. CIA, just since I know it best. Ratcliffe, this is not an attack on him personally, the director, should have fired everybody on the top floor of the headquarters building the first day he walked in there, the first minute of the first day. I'm not talking about admin assistants and so forth, obviously. I mean, all of the top folks in that organization should have been told their services were not required at day one. Put your stuff in that box. Security will escort you out. The game is over. The status quo no longer exists, and then we'll go from and that's literally the first minute. We're going to go from there. That's not the end of anything. That's the beginning. And the same thing needs to happen at the Bureau. Again, I'm not attacking Cash, but
everybody else is right now.
Well, I mean, right now, the reality is that CIA, FBI, whatever agency you want to talk about, They exist today in essentially precisely the same form they existed under Joe Biden. So there have been no mass firings. There has been no major change, unfortunately.
Seriously?
Not true. I wish that were not true.
John Ratcliffe has not fired anybody from like the 7th floor yet? That's it? He hasn't done that?
No.
Oh, holy
So
shinola.
you have Ratcliffe. You have Ratcliffe and his deputy, who were
What?
appointed by Ratcliffe and his deputy, who were appointed by Trump, sit in offices on the 7th floor, and outside of the doors of those offices, the entire organization worldwide exists as it was when he walked in the door. So you think about the implications of that. Most of the people who are in senior positions now were brought up, put into those positions, and promoted under Joe Biden, under Obama, under John Brennan, under this whole regime. So there's a lot of years there where the entire leadership at the senior levels has become people put into those positions who were politically put into those positions by the other side, for lack of a better way to summarize, and they remain in power today. So look, CIA is a relatively small organization when it comes to the federal government, but it's still a big place, and when all the leadership below the director is all the same old folks. Look, at FBI, unfortunately, it's the same. FBI is what, slightly over 40,000 people. I think there have been 2 or 3 senior guys who have left. Other than that, it's the same bureau. So you can't expect change if you don't begin there.
Oh man, that just sucks. That's super bad. I saw Andrew McCabe on probably MSNBC or something today, and just quickly I heard him say about this shooter of the National Guards persons that, he said at least 2 or 3 things that I knew were wrong, and I thought, well, what's he still doing there? What's the guy who lied, who was cut loose because he was a liar? What's he doing on that station? And then furthermore, is he doing just giving misinformation? Some of it was good, I'm not going to lie, but it was just ridiculous.
Yeah, well, and understand that if we're talking about collection of intelligence domestically, in other words, who are the guys who are supposed to go out and find these terrorist cells on U.S. soil and stop them from doing something?
Yeah.
That's actually not CIA. I mean, CIA hopefully will bring information from overseas and hand it to somebody that will help. But the FBI is the domestic counterintelligence organization. So all of this finding bad guys on U.S. soil stuff, that's the Bureau. That's not just practical, by law, that's the Bureau.
I like the idea of just tossing people out if they don't like us. Bye.
I'm all for that. We should toss people out at CIA, and we should throw a whole bunch of these people we've allowed to come into the country out. Yeah.
Mass house cleaning for the United States of America. Sam Faddis, thank you so much for coming on. And where do we get in touch with you, Mr. Faddis? How do we find your
the easiest way to find me is to go to the magazine that my wife and I and some other former Intel guys run online, and magazine, andmagazine.substack.com. And that'll take you to everywhere else we are.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good talking to you again.
Great talking to you too. And let's do it again. I pray that we can. Well, that's amazing. I mean, can you imagine the fact that they are not cleaning house at the CIA? They're not cleaning house at the FBI? That's just insane. And yesterday there was a big story, and it was on Fox, which, is saying something really. And Laura Ingraham, I really appreciate her and her ability to sort of chase things down. She had Miranda Devine on, and she was talking about Miranda's story that was in the New York Post, that people are complaining about Kash Patel and talking about how they think that he's just an empty suit and that they need a little bit more from him. But if you think about that. Who is that saying that? I trust Miranda's reportage, her reportage, and I appreciate the fact that she's got sources everywhere. They come to her. And I just wonder what it is that these people have done in the past, and maybe Kash Patel, instead of getting run out on a rail, should run them out on a rail. Obviously, these are anonymous whistleblowers, but very interesting. One last thing I wanted to bring to your attention before we go back and say goodnight and tell you that we'll see you on Thursday. And it's this. Here is a situation in Oregon, and it's where we started. We end as we start. The dispiriting of the right-thinking people of this country when they look and they say, oh, man, the Oregon governor says that, they're doing wrong things, even though she never said anything about anything they were doing wrong. And then the attorney general, and then you got the seditious six talking about the fact that there are so many people doing the wrong thing. They're breaking the law. They must be, you have the right to not carry out an illegal order. Just, of course, calling into question everything. That's the point of it. Okay. Here we go. Listen to this dillweed talking to this ICE agent or Border Patrol dude. And the Border Patrol dude stops him. Why? Because he is chasing them on the road and telling people where they are going. And you can't do that. Listen to the dillweed inside the car, thinking he's all big shot.
Name and badge number, please. You're impeding. Name and badge number, please. Okay, Zulu 11. Sorry, say again? Zulu 11. So this is your only one. Zulu 11 is your name? That's my badge number. That's all you need to know. No, I need to know your name and badge number and what agency you're with. This is what you're doing right now. This is your only warning. You're impeding right now with the federal agent. I'm not impeding anyone.
Says him.
I'm not impeding anyone. You will be arrested. You're impeding. This is your only warning. Listen, do you hear me? I have not impeded anyone. Hey, you're becoming a safety concern. Nope. For the public and us working right now. Nope. This is your only warning. Nope.
They're not going to believe you, buddy.
That's an illegal stop. What agency are you with? What agency are you with? Yes, you will be arrested.
Oh, well, isn't that guy? It's funny. If you don't know actually what your rights are or what's going on in the battle space of your life, and if you think you're a badass because you're driving a car and you're chasing an ICE agent or Border Patrol, and you think that you can ask for the badge number, there's nothing wrong with that. But the guy's telling you what you're doing is against the law. And I'm just losing count of how many times I've seen one of those press releases out by the Oregon and or California or Washington U.S. Attorney's Office, in which they say impeding a federal officer is a felony, serviceable of your time for 5 freaking years in the doggone prison. This is not child's play. And that's happened. It happened again. Where was that one? I think that was in Washington that we just played that video last week or something for you. And it's all just, you're not the boss of me, says the ICE agent to this guy. And you got to know what your rights are. And your rights are, you can ask him what his badge number is. Fine. And that's great. And if he tells you that what you are doing is breaking the law, you know what they say? You know what the old ACLU used to say to people, and they don't do it that very much anymore. I guess they've been sort of crowded out by our friends over at the National Lawyers Guild, the green hat people. They used to say, look, step aside. If you don't want to be arrested, step aside. Just hold your powder, come back, talk to us, and we'll tell you whether or not what he said was legal or not. And then we'll go from there. Otherwise, shut up and do what you're told, basically. It's kind of crazy. It really is crazy. You're not the boss of him. He actually knows the law better than you do. I bet you he's been through many times where he's been told what the law is. And, if you ever have any doubts about what your rights are, this is not pertaining necessarily to federal officers, but just general to the cops on the street. Go watch that video, which changed my life. And I'm a civil libertarian, and I didn't know some of this stuff. And that is never talk to a cop, never talk to a police officer. And it's a lecture in a law school conducted by a lawyer and a cop. If you haven't seen it, it's amazing. Maybe someday we'll go over it. Anyway, I'll talk to you on Thursday. We'll have another live stream. And of course, as always, we will make sure that this edition of the Adult in the Room podcast is put on all the rest of the platforms. Spotify, blah, 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 YouTube, Twitter /X, Facebook now. We're going to do that. And I think we're going to do TikTok because I guess as long as I don't have to download it, I'm fine with that. A bunch of chai coms. No thanks. And let's see what else. Yes. Look up and make sure that you take, figure out where you are, and heart out and strive to be the adult in the room. Please pass it on. Get your notifications, subscribe, share, all that stuff. It really does make a difference. And it makes the difference out of all. Thanks again. See you Thursday. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of the Adult in the Room podcast. We do not take you for granted. We appreciate every single person who tunes in every week to listen and watch this program. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday, live streaming on Rumble, and then on every other podcast platform shortly thereafter when we can port it over and get it over there as soon as we can. All the shows can be found at victoriataft.com, where the censorship regime has been banned by me. Follow me on social media at these names: Victoria Taft, the Adult in the Room podcast, and the Victoria Taft Show. Send media inquiries, or any others for that matter, to victoria@victoriataft.com. And here's a big ask. Would you please subscribe, share, like, comment, recommend, and give this program a 5-star rating where you can? We really appreciate it. We do not take that for granted either. Follow my work at, you guessed it, victoriataft.com. PJ Media, I write tons over there. Flamingo Audiobooks, and of course the radio. I don't do this alone. This show is produced and engineered by Overall Media. 1A Cast is responsible for some of the Adult in the Room podcast's imaging. Logo design by Hageman Creative. The Adult in the Room podcast is produced at Flamingo Road Studios. All rights reserved.